For it is written, the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with her blood. And I saw her sit upon a hairy beast, and she held forth a golden chalice full of the filthiness of her fornications. And upon her forehead was written, behold, I am the great mother of harlots and all abominations of the earth.
Werewolf?
There. What? Werewolf. Their castle.
So, this being October, what better time than to look at scary movies with werewolves? So, in September 2024, I thought it would be a good idea to watch a load of werewolf films. I was wrong. So I watched about 75 werewolf films. Some I had seen before, most I hadn't. There's some obvious ones on the list that I didn't have time to watch, or I've watched before. But what did I find out about these films? Most of them are rubbish. I'll be kind and say maybe 2 out of every 5 were worth watching, but apart from that, it was not a fun month. So what I found out is that werewolf lore, in films anyway, is a lot different to vampire lore. Now with vampires, they kill you to drink your blood, to keep them alive, or to turn people into vampires, but what do werewolves do? In most films they're just trying to kill people, so they're not trying to turn them or make them into a group of werewolves. And the other thing is, very few werewolves eat what they kill. So in this video, we'll have a look at the lore that these films try to follow and where they vary. And what's the biggest difference in all these films? It's how the werewolf changes. The one thing every werewolf film has is the change scene. But most films keep it short, unlike some films, Looking at You, American Werewolf in London, and The Howling. Most films have neither the time or the money to do a great transformation scene. Usually, its hands and face are parts of the change. All non-CGI effects in films used edits to cover the change, like Monster Squad here, for example, and some don't, which we'll see later in a film called Werewolf. So these are just 3 of the best werewolf transformation scenes. And of course they're from the 80s, the decade of the best practical effects. But it is the actors that should share the credit, as otherwise it's just a guy standing there in latex and fake hair. But I do believe a lot of thanks should go to the editors of these films, as they're the ones that put these scary scenes together. Remember a few minutes ago I said that the 80s had the best practical effects? It does, and then again, it doesn't, as we see here. But points for trying at least. Because the Howling 2 does try at least to do a transformation, I'll bet in the dark. And then of course Howling 3 does the change with edits. And unfortunately, Bad Moon does have the CGI, which then goes to a bad puppet. But at least these scenes are mercifully short. Remember that film Werewolf I mentioned earlier? Well, check this out. That film was made 6 years after The Howling and American Werewolf in London. And of course there's 2 more Howling sequels, making the series look very bad indeed. But then we have CGI come in and make transformation scenes par excellence.
This is so perfect like CGI.
So Hollywood says, hold my beer and look what I can do. The 2 things that CGI effects spoil for me is the lighting and the movements. Things just don't seem right. Like this bit, for instance. This is supposed to be the scariest part, yet I am struggling to hold a laugh from escaping. So what do these movie werewolves look like? Well, there's 2 main types. One is the standing up full werewolf, and the other is a more actual wolf. So much wolf-like, it literally is a dog with a lot of hair stuck on. Then there's the one where you can keep all your clothes on, which does keep the cost down of buying some hair. And the full werewolf suit also has 2 looks, with the long snout or the short snout. Just depends on where you get your costumes from. While most werewolf movies have the long snout, big ears wolf look, there are a few exceptions. Some that look like monkeys, and some that look like bears. Then there's those that go all out with the hair, to those that keep it to a minimum. There's also the decision on how tall a werewolf should be. Tall and overbearing, or short and scrappy.
The female of the species is more deadly than the male.
So what about representation, I don't hear you cry? Well, here are the lady werewolves. Let's see what they look like. Are they sexy? So there are a few female werewolf movies, but just like the other werewolf movies, just a small percentage of them that are any good. And whether you find them sexy or not is up to your personal tastes. So before I continue, let's have a word from Captain Adam about werewolf movies.
Ahoy there, mates. Captain Adam here, and hey, let's talk about werewolves. Yes, the lovable, lycanthropic monster archetype that's clawed its way into our hearts. The legends of which have been present all throughout human history, and basically ever since there's been folklore, there's been werewolf stories. This fact was not lost on the world of cinema, and eventually werewolf movies would become their own horror film subgenre. And we would be inundated with tons of werewolf films, the most famous of which being Universal's The Wolfman. Now that isn't the first werewolf film, but certainly the first one that comes to mind. And it's the best example of a werewolf movie breaking into the mainstream of popular culture. Because hey, everyone that's hip knows the Wolfman. And you don't even need to be a horror fan to know who he is and what he is. And out of all the other werewolf films there's really only one other that's broken into the mainstream spotlight. And that is An American Werewolf in London. Because everybody knows this movie, and even if you've never seen it, you still know of it. Released in theaters August 21st, 1981, this movie would become an immediate cult classic and instantly cement itself within pop culture. It just fired on all cylinders and hit every mark, and one thing it did do was change the way we viewed werewolves. Up until this point in time, werewolves on film were mainly represented as more humanoid than wolf-like, certainly not very bestial. The best example of this would be the Universal Pictures Wolfman design, and while that was fine and all and certainly iconic, it really didn't remind you of a wolf. Hell, he looked more like a Dick Tracy villain. I'm rubbing Dick Tracy out, see? And then there were films like The Beast Must Die, wherein the werewolf design was an actual dog wearing a wig. Sure, that's bestial all right, but it's a dog. An American Werewolf in London gave us a werewolf that was a wolf-like hell beast that was absolutely terrifying. It really drove home the point that being a werewolf is a curse, and a werewolf is indeed a hideous monster, and not just some guy who gets hairier. It's a werewolf that looks like a wolf. See, it's got a doggy snoot and pointed ears, like a wolf does. An American Werewolf in London also changed the game when it came to werewolf transformation scenes. Because again, up until this point, werewolf transformation scenes on film were, kind of dodgy. But that's understandable because of limitations in film technology. But An American Werewolf in London came out at a time when the technology was there, and they did it so well. It really stands out. It's really unsettling. It's sort of hard to watch. Very uncomfortable. And that's pretty realistic because in all actuality, it would be. Turning into a wolf beast certainly would not be a pleasant experience. Oh, it's like a fun tickle. So really it seems that there's two fundamentals that you gotta have when making a werewolf film, which are having a great werewolf design and having a great transformation scene. And An American Werewolf in London does both these things extremely well. But 1981 would give us another werewolf film that did both these things extremely well, as well. The Howling, which was released a few months prior to An American Werewolf in London, also had great transformation scenes and an awesome werewolf design, wherein it was more wolf-like than humanoid and was actually scary. And even though it is said that The Howling is regarded by horror fans as one of the greatest, if not the greatest werewolf film, it never got the mainstream steam that An American Werewolf in London did. Who knows why that kind of stuff happens, but really both these films are great werewolf movies, and The Howling certainly should be more well remembered than it is. An American Werewolf in London was just the right movie at the right time. It was very stylish, and I don't even really know what that means, but it seems like it describes it very well. It really did change the public's perception on not just werewolf movies, but monster movies in general. In the decades before this movie's release, it seemed that monster movies were being regarded as B-movies, as sort of schlock, as throwaway films that you would take a date to see, and hopefully you got a hand job in the theater. They were campy drive-in flicks. They certainly weren't being made to be serious bits of horror cinema. And if that's what they were going for, it sure didn't seem like it. I mean, come on. Do you think anybody took I Was a Teenaged Werewolf seriously? An American Werewolf in London, and The Howling for that matter, made the public take monster movies seriously once again. And what's best about An American Werewolf in London is that it combined the suspense and feeling of terror and dread of classic monster movies with the gore and shock of the then relatively new subgenre of slasher films. Whether knowingly or not, they did a great job of combining these two styles of horror movies. It's a tremendous merging of classic and modern horror, and all in all, An American Werewolf in London was the werewolf movie we always wanted. And you may be wondering if I'm going to be talking about its sequel, An American Werewolf in Paris. Well, I could, or I could spend a minute giving you a dissertation on actual dog shit, but I'm not going to do either. So this is where my segment ends. This has been Captain Adam of Captain Adam's VHS Pirate Ship. Take care out there, and beware the full moon. Excuse me.
He did the Monster Mash.
There was one name that came up above all in these movies. Paul Naschy, I think it's pronounced. Naschy, maybe. But he did 13 films with werewolves in. So as you can see, here's the list where his werewolf fought vampires, Dr. Jekyll, yetis, anything really. But I can't say I enjoyed his films, as I only saw about 3 and that was enough for me. But hats off to him for making werewolf movies for over 40 years. And now a look at werewolf films from a vampire's point of view with Alucard.
Children of the night, what music they make. Ah, lycanthropy. Is it a curse? Is it an affliction? Depends on the story, really. I was first introduced to werewolves as a child, watching Universal's The Wolfman with Lon Chaney Jr., and it's still my favorite werewolf movie today. You can feel the agony and the disgust through Lon Chaney's incredible performance. Overall, though, lycanthropy seems to be a giant burden to most of its victims. Half the time, the person isn't even really sure that they're a werewolf, or if they are aware, they try to prevent harm from happening, kind of like Oz in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, or they try to stop it, like the guy in the Monster Squad. You also have characters that change into a wolf at will, such as Dracula. So werewolf movies tend to explore a change. Sometimes it's puberty, or a medical condition, such as like a brain disorder, a hereditary condition, or even an infectious disease. We've also got some fantastic special effects / makeup out of a few films, such as The Howling, An American Werewolf in London, and the previously mentioned Monster Squad. However, there do seem to be more bad werewolf movies than good. Most are done on a slim budget with subpar performances and incredibly bad special effects, which drag the genre down considerably. But don't let that deter you. There are a few diamonds in the rough. You just have to find them. But remember, even a man who is pure in heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright.
So it comes to no surprise there are not many franchises of werewolf movies, as usually the werewolf is killed by the end of the film. Or the franchises that there are just use different characters as they go along and just use the same title. The Howling might be the biggest franchise for werewolf movies, with 8 films, mostly unconnected.
Used to be a werewolf, but I'm alright now.
Ways to kill a werewolf.
Silver bullet?
And?
That's it. Shoot him with the silver bullet.
Nope, sorry, Rudy.
Okay, so what's the other way?
What?
Second way to kill a werewolf.
Car crash? Accident with power tools? Old age? Falling out of a window? Onto a bomb?
So it turns out there are very few films that actually use a silver bullet to kill the werewolf in the end. Some use other weapons, such as normal bullets, fire, swords, axes, explosions, whatever comes to hand. As I guess the writers think getting silver bullets from somewhere isn't as easy as it sounds. What have I learned from this? Well, apart from there's a lot of films I won't want to watch again, but most of these films do start with a quick kill, usually a throat rip or a decapitation. So does that mean Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse is a werewolf? And talking of killings, these things could tear you to shreds in seconds.
To shreds, you say? Well, how is his wife holding up? To shreds, you say?
But then by the time the film ends, they're sort of play fighting with the hero. There's also no consistency of when people become and change back from being a werewolf. Some do it at midnight, some do it when the full moon, some only do it when moonlight is on them. There's no constant rule for this one. Also, you get full moons during the daytime. Do people not change into werewolves seeing that? Healing abilities is another one. Sometimes they get injured as a werewolf, and then when they revert back to the human, they keep the injury. And other times they're not affected by anything that comes at them. And then there's clothing.
Yes, sir? A naked American man stole my balloons.
What?
This seems to happen more with werewolves that can change at will, where they seem to change into a werewolf and back again, and still keep their clothes intact. This usually happens to keep some suspense and mystery of who is the werewolf, though. But the biggest question overall is, what about the werewolf genitals?
Kick him in the north! Kick him in the north! He doesn't have north! Do it! Do it! Wolfman's got north!
There was a few films that featured wolf genitals, but it's mostly the Howling series that features with the sexual arousal of werewolves and getting it on. So I'm going for a lie down. I've had enough of these films. Thanks for watching. Here ends the lesson.